Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our SkySwitch University webinar. This is Emily Vasquez of SkySwitch, and before we jump into this session, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. With us today, we have Pem Hutchison, Regional Director of CSC Leasing, and Jason Jones, VP of Sales and Business Development at SkySwitch. Pem will be presenting his slide deck for us, and afterwards we'll be holding a Q&A session. So I encourage everyone on this call today to type any and all questions into the questions widget section of your GoToMeeting control panel during any point in this webinar. And as a reminder, we're recording today's webinar to be posted on our YouTube channel and emailed out to all of you this afternoon. So at this point, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Pem.
Thank you, Emily. And I appreciate everybody being able to take some time out of their day to come learn about Device as a Service, or DaaS, which is obviously something that we're all hearing out in the market. That is something that is a new path to market for both the service providers being able to make it easier to buy for their end user customers. So without further ado, kind of jumping into it, I wanted to spend some time focusing on the past market. And the past market, essentially, if you break it down, what you guys, potentially service providers, have been doing in the past is providing hardware from their distributors and marking it up and just reselling it to their end users as an upfront cost. Traditionally, it comes on a separate bill from your monthly service charges. And in order to curb some of your end users asking, well, how do I get around this upfront cost? A lot of UCaaS providers and service providers in the market have found leasing partnerships, white label partnerships. And what these partnerships are really centered around is a leasing company, very similar to a company like ourselves, that actually would lease to your end user, whether it was Geico, a hospital system. They were not actually leasing to the service provider or the UCaaS provider or the ITSP, whatever four-letter acronym you might want to use. What they were doing was looking through at the credit of the end user. Now, this is a great idea and concept. It solved a lot of problems for a lot of service providers in being able to solve this upfront CAPEX cost that their end users were having to pay cash for. But what it ultimately did was give the service provider's customer away to the leasing company, because essentially those leasing companies ended up transacting business directly with the end user. And it's no longer essentially, in the eyes of the end user, potentially the potential service provider's customer. It's turned into a leasing provider's customer and also a service provider's customer. So, as I said, the other option was just saying, hey, Mr. End User, you figure out the hardware on your own. And in that scenario, the service provider was just billing the customer for everything except the hardware items on a monthly basis. Either way, the customer is getting two or more bills, either one bill up front and then a monthly service bill from the service provider, or they were getting one leasing bill from their leasing provider, and then also one service bill. So what's kind of changed, and what does hardware as a service mean? Really, all that hardware as a service means is that the ITSPs, the service providers, or the dealers are going to purchase equipment on behalf of their customers. Essentially, there are a variety of different funding methods that have been out there. One is use your internal cash, i.e. buy the phones and then wrap them in to your service contract, basically becoming the bank yourself for those transactions and then determining what payoff period you might want to have for those hardware items, whether it's 12 or 18 months. Then secondly, you have the option to use your bank facilities. Those will be your local community banks, maybe even some larger regional banks that could get comfortable with you putting equipment on your end user's premises. That tends to be some of the rubs with bank facilities, is they only want the equipment to be located at your own headquarters. And as we all know, a lot of service providers, if they're doing their job correctly, are actually putting assets out into the field at their end user locations. The third option to kind of offer this new device as a service option in the market is to acquire equity and give away a little bit of your company. Given most unified communications and service providers can be started as sole proprietors, the last thing you want to do is probably give up equity. And then you obviously have the option to lease or rent on a match term basis. And that's really, where I come in. It's really where my specialty is in the market, and where CSC has spent the last 15 years of its 32-year history gaining an expertise in really leasing or renting equipment to you, the service provider. So whether you choose me or you choose internal cash or you choose bank facilities, what you're doing is you're finding money to help you support this free phone that you're trying to offer to the market. Part of what you can do as well, given where the market is today, it's pretty nascent in terms of how, given that everybody cannot offer these phones wrapped in as a service, we have a lot of my customers and others who are offering devices as a service at a premium. So if it costs $3 or $4 for me to rent it or lease it for a month, some people are charging $6 or $7 a month. And that could be the same for bank or internal cash. You just are basically deciding what your markup is on a monthly basis. The next step would be to wrap it into your service bill and then issue one bill to your end user, and then really allow you to continue to do what you do best, which is continue to deliver excellent customer service on a month-over-month basis for the phone service, and really just allow us to enable, or other funding methods to enable, the ability to offer the phones as part of that unique and exclusive service that you guys already provide. So at the bottom, I've obviously highlighted the customer gets one bill, which is what really has driven this device as a service concept in the market. A lot of the end users were tired of getting multiple bills. And ultimately, I think, from my seat at least, that this is where the most beneficial piece to both the end user and the service provider is in this entire solution. And again, you don't have to use a lease or a rental. You could use these other methods as well. But we really think this is where the opportunity is for the entire market to continue to expand on this. So CSC Leasing, obviously, I'd like to give a little overview of us. I mentioned some of it. We're privately owned and operated, been around since 1985. We've worked with many VARs, which essentially are service providers, and we've worked with many OEMs and many end users. And we focus on, obviously, long-term relationships, but we are truly starting to become more and more aligned with the service providers. As I mentioned, the last 15 years, our expertise has been in working with managed service providers for data center equipment, and also starting to support the telecom equipment and also the end user premise equipment. So we're very comfortable in working with customers who have long-term and large contracts with their end users. We understand that you guys are basically acquiring this equipment in order to support a longer-term contract, and we bring that view to each and every transaction. So on top of that, and it really is, we believe in the value of technology comes from using it, not owning it. And what I mean by that is really, whether it's us or a bank or somebody else, it really gets you, the service provider, out of the business of potentially becoming the bank for these types of specialty programs. We're allowing you to basically take our monthly cost of goods sold that we're providing you on an OPEX basis and mark it up. We want you guys to get out of the business of actually owning equipment and having to refresh and upgrade it, but more so get into the business of using somebody else's financing and liquidity in order to make money and also allow your customers to potentially have refreshes in the future. So number 3, CSC handles the ordering and procurement of the hardware. Unlike some of the other devices and service providers and other leasing companies in the market, we do not outsource anything. We do not have manufacturers who are going to be handling all these discussions on our behalf. You'll be dealing with myself or a member of our account team or our lease administration team throughout the process. So enough on CSC, but the kind of diving into what our leasing structures, if you were to get on the leasing and or rental path, what that might look like in order to support devices as a service. You have the first option, which is a month-to-month. It's a true rental. It's kind of like renting a car or anything else you might do. The billing stops when the equipment is returned. There's no minimum requirement for how long you have to keep it. We do ask that you obviously try to keep the equipment installed, otherwise the program might not last in perpetuity. But if it's in the spirit of trying to work through customer solutions, we are able to offer those true rental programs And that's really what the value is to a lot of the market here, is the ability to offer a vendor agnostic, true rental for a variety of different phone types and manufacturers. So then you have the options of a firm term lease, which are 24 and 36 months. You have 3 options at the end of these types of leases. Unlike the month-to-month, where you only have the option to stop the billing with a return, here you have the option to return the equipment, much like the rental, extend the equipment for 12 or 24 months. And in that scenario, you would probably be able to take 30 to 40% off your monthly cost to CSC, or buy out the equipment at the fair market value, which is not a dollar buyout, just due to the way that the way that it's structured and the way that it allows us to get comfortable with a lot of the large contract-backed needs that you guys have. We actually have to structure them from a legal perspective as a fair market value lease. So if there's anybody on the call who wants to dive into that further about the differences, certainly happy to do that offline. But our program is really centered around the options for 24 and 36. And really what ends up happening with the 30 some odd customers that we've brought on in the past 6 months is they end up truing it up with the customer contract that you have with your end user. Obviously, you guys are offering a variety of different terms to your end users, and this allows you the flexibility to be able to contract the line and truly kind of provide financing on a like term basis to what you guys are offering to your end user. So not to get too far into the procurement methods, but CSC offers 2 different types of options. Obviously we would come to terms on what the leasing would look like, or the rental. You'd make a decision on the slide above about which one you'd want to move forward with, but then you'd ask how you might want to order the equipment, because obviously time and speediness and a lot of other factors and variables are important to the service provider community in order to deliver best-in-class service. So company 1, in this example, it's called a one-time order. This is this is, in our eyes, could be somebody like a service provider that is chasing primarily school districts and other large opportunities. So in this scenario, on January 15th, the service provider lands the school districts and wants to place a one-time order of equipment, 20 units at $100 a piece. Service provider submits that quote to CSC, and upon receipt of that quote, what CSC would do is we would bill you for a one-time security deposit, which is 1 month's rent up front. And then at that point, once you guys have paid as a service provider that 1 month up front, then we would have the opportunity to then place that purchase order on your behalf. All that's happening in that transaction is essentially the service provider is telling us where they want it to be shipped, whether it's to the service provider's location to be provisioned, or whether it's actually to the end user's location in the event that the distributor has done the provisioning themselves. So once that happens, you've got the ship to squared away in that scenario. You also look to what does the bill to look like. And all that's going to be different from that scenario is the bill to is going to be CSC Leasing instead of the service provider. So there will be a separate account set up within each of your distributors for a CSC-service provider bill to account. So in the event you also want to have a cash purchase account and also a leasing or rental account with a certain distributor, CSC would be able to accommodate that. Getting back to the math on this, if you had 20 units at $100 a unit, that's $2,000 of total equipment that would be put under rental or lease. And what would happen, and we'll get to some more of these lease rate factors further on down in the presentation, but this is essentially how the monthly payment would be determined for the rental. 2,000 times 0.03 would be $60. 24 months would be 2,000 times 0.0290, or $58 a month that you guys, or service provider, would owe CSC Leasing. And then on a 36-month lease, you would go down and multiply 2,000 times 0.021, which would be $56 a month. So as you note in this example, which is not the purpose of this slide, but you note that the month-to-month rental is going to be the most expensive to the service provider, which is probably very similar to the service provider's pricing to the end user if they want a month-to-month obligation versus a longer-term deal. So that's essentially how those different lease rate factors line up and how the one-time ordering option would happen. And please keep in mind, it'll be important for the next slide, that this is a one-time security deposit that can be refunded when the equipment returns in good working order. And it's the same as your monthly lease rate. But as you go down and you look at what's our second option, which is we've had to develop over time with this program. And that's essentially company two orders throughout the month. Service provider lands many smaller deals. They place orders as they come in to the distributor, and the CSC rolls up to a total at the end of the month, which comes to the minimum required order size of 2,000. So total quantity still need to get 20 units to meet the minimum of 2,000. But in this scenario, you order 9 units on the 2nd of the month, 2 units on the 16th, 3 units on the 21st, 3 units on the 25th, and 1 order on the 30th. Same cost basis as you will note down here. I'm going to use this mouse to show this out of $2,000, and you have the same monthly payments that flow out from the option above. The only difference here is there is a one-time non-refundable administration fee due to us processing multiple orders. So essentially, CSC in the above scenario is able to process orders that are $2,000 or greater in size. So in this below scenario, when I'm processing 2 or 3 units at a time, that's way below our $2,000 order threshold. But in order to accommodate the fact that a lot of service providers, a lot of UCaaS providers are focused on 1 to 5 to 10 seat customers, we thought this model would be a way to solve that problem. So essentially, coming back to it, the only difference between these two models is you can order throughout the month, not really hitting that minimum $2,000 order, but you are charged a one-time administration fee, which is the exact same as the security deposit in that it's 1 month's rent of your monthly lease rate. So if it's 1 month on 2,000, it's a $60 fee. If you're doing a 24-month lease, it would be a $58 fee. And if it's a 36-month lease, it'd be a $56 fee. So that's, and I'm sure people have plenty of follow-up questions on those two ordering options. It is probably the most complicated part of the program, but I promise we've set them up in 2 separate ways that hopefully align with how you guys order on a day-in, day-out basis. So moving onward, just to kind of rehash some of the main service provider benefits that I may or may not have hit on yet, are flexible terms that are dependent on the end user benefit needs. So essentially, you're able to contract a line, which I mentioned to earlier. You're not stuck with some other programs in the market with having to do only a rental program. If you've got a large customer and you're able to sign them up for a 24 or 36-month obligation from your service plan perspective, then we certainly are able to offer a 24 or 36-month lease to support that. Secondly, you avoid upfront costs and save cash flow. As I alluded to earlier, you get out of the business of being your own bank, and you let a finance company help you with that. You're moving your hardware from CAPEX to OPEX on your books, because essentially you've had to purchase that equipment and get a return over time. And now I'm just providing you an OPEX monthly cost that you're able to mark up and pass through to your customer. You're able to eliminate commitment and ownership risk in the event you want to go with the rental option. You can mitigate the IT obsolescence curve. Certainly, we don't anticipate phones being changed or upgraded every 24 or 36 months, but we do anticipate that at 36 or 48 months, this will hopefully cut down on customers having antiquated phones and ultimately allow that obsolescence curve to be kind of truncated. Then you have deliver and plan for repeatable margin. Instead of trying to develop, having to buy equipment up front in order to accommodate an end user's request for one bill and then trying to find a way to make that money back over time, what I'm going to do is provide you with a lease floor, a cost floor that you can then mark up or leave as is, but you're going to know exactly what that monthly payment is, and there's no ambiguity around that. Then you have complement monthly recurring revenue models. So essentially, by bringing this model and combining it with your service contract model, you're going to be able to have 2 recurring revenue models that you can combine together and ultimately increase your recurring revenue. Simplify your pricing equation. As I said above, when it's repeatable and it's the same monthly cost, you can actually tell your salespeople and build it into your pricing tools so they know exactly how low they might be able to go on the hardware side of the equation in the event you do want to charge margin. Then you've got certain manufacturer benefits. For instance, we've got a very strategic relationship with now coming on 2 or 3 manufacturers. One example would be if you are under our program through Yealink, we're able to offer an extended warranty free of charge from 1 year, which is their standard warranty. If your bill to shows up as CSC under this program for Yealink, you'll have a 3-year warranty for them at no additional cost to you. And lastly, as this benefit on this sheet is compete against the free phone. If you're able to deliver better in-class service than some of the bigger guys in the market, this gives you the opportunity to compete against the free phones that they're offering, and not have to necessarily use all of your cash in order to do so. And then I highlight again at the bottom, and it kind of comes back to it, but it's really important, is for a service provider, by offering this, you're going to increase your monthly recurring revenue. You're no longer going to make upfront margin on the phones and then service margin on service margins on a monthly basis. Instead, now you're going to have all monthly recurring revenue, which, as this market potentially could consolidate in the next 3 to 10 years, this will be incredibly lucrative and beneficial in the event you try to consolidate companies and or trying to sell your company in the future. End user benefits. The main one, and the one we're all trying to solve for, is one bill. That's really been the heartache that's created this whole need for device as a service, is not wanting to have multiple bills going back and forth for phone service, for the hardware, one for the hardware and one for the services. And secondly, and probably most importantly, is CAPEX to OPEX. And I highlight this with the third bullet, that service providers will only be able to get OPEX to their end users. Service providers will be the only way to get OPEX to end users with the upcoming accounting changes. What I mean by that is, if you're Geico and you need to have a phone, they used to lease phones for sheerly tax purposes. And with the new accounting changes, the only way that Geico or some of the larger enterprises are going to be able to get that OPEX treatment that has allowed them to mitigate their tax liabilities is going to be through service providers, and essentially service providers creating an OPEX cost to them, or a service cost. So when you create the per seat cost basis for a phone, that's now going to be treated much like an electric bill, as an OPEX charge, and will ultimately be good for any end user's bottom line from a tax perspective. So as I move on from the benefits for both the service provider and the end user, I think it's important to run through the math. And I'm going to scroll back up here in a little bit, but tier 1, which is the example I used with my school district and with the person ordering over the course of the month, the lease rate factors are 0.03, 0.0290, or 0.0281. As you'll notice up above, those are those numbers that we're multiplying the $2,000 order amount by to get your monthly payment. So if you wanted to hypothetically look at what it would cost for a $10,000 payment, you could say $10,000 times 0.03 and come up with the math on that. And as you scale it out, so there's a lot of flexibility in how we quote the pricing as a 0.03 as a decimal point. We do that so that the service provider can take whatever their purchase price is from their distributor and apply the same logic to understand what their monthly dollar amount would be to us. So there were tier 1, tier 2, and then those are for certain asset classes, some like Yealink that we have strategic partnerships with, and others. And then there's also class B, or assets that we're not as familiar with or we're not as comfortable with. And these could be anything from telephones. These could be anything from telephones from manufacturers that are not Yealink, and others like that, or it could also be assets that are outside of the phone realm. We've actually started to look even at some Edgemark devices, which fall into these types of buckets because they are different from phones. But we are offering 2 different classes of asset types and how we price them. As you'll note, the pricing is a little bit more expensive here with the 0.04, 0.0360, and 0.030. But we have yet to turn down a type of equipment in this type of class of asset. So we're still growing each and every day with each one of our customers' needs, but as we grow, again, we haven't turned one down yet, but I'm sure I could be proven wrong on that one. So the question might become, if you haven't totally fallen asleep yet and you might not want to use a different path with banking or equity, how do you enroll, or how do you, explore more about what CSC leasing or a device as a service program could do for you? You can fill out the DAS application in its entirety, which I can certainly get, and we'll get to the SkySwitch team afterward. You send us the requested financial information, CSC underwrites your request, and we pre-approve you for an estimated quarterly or semi-annually volume, so whether it's $50,000, $100,000, and that whole process takes, let's call it 5 to 7 business days. With me trying to hopefully beat those expectations, but we are tending to get people in easily under 5 days today. So that's kind of the program in a nutshell, and also the topic in a nutshell of how hardware as a service is affecting the voice over IP community. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Pem. That was great. And it does look like we have a question in from John Adams. He is asking, will the service providers be charged sales tax on the monthly payment for the hardware?
That's a great question. I hate the answer is no. They will not be charged sales tax in the event that they provide the appropriate tax exemption form to our team. I've got something like 75 to 80% of our customers in the service provider community are tax exempt to date. So assuming you provide the correct documentation, yes, sales tax can't be excluded.
Okay, great.
Well, hey, this is Jason. I just want to say a few things out there. I think this is an exciting time because we all know that being business people, we love using somebody else's money in order to, acquire anything in our lives. I mean, we go over to buy a new TV. If they got 24 months, same as cash, we're going to jump all over that. Use somebody else's money to get what you want and to grow your businesses. And I think that's all this is what Pem is really talking about here. And I think every small, medium-sized business can be interested in this or should be interested in this because, it's all about use of funds. You're a small business. Think of you raising some money and getting some money. How are you going to utilize that money? You don't have it today. So if you were to utilize this DAS program, what impact would that have on the growth of your business? And those are the type of questions, I really want you to think about and ponder, as you start talking about this, as these questions do come up, and we got more questions coming in, you've got Pem's information here. Just go out and, reach out to him and he'll answer any questions for you. But again, being able to take that money, that capital, move your services into more of an OPEX, and then reserve that money and utilize it for marketing, for advertising, for AdWords spend, whatever it might be, that's the right approach to growing your business. Let's move over to some of these other questions. You want to go ahead and take that, Emily?
Yes, absolutely. We have one from Walt Rush. He is asking, can we offer switches and other network gear?
So that's a great question as well. And as I alluded to earlier, we've got, to date, we have not turned down a type of asset. So the answer is yes. We can take a look at switchers and routers and a variety of other different things. We have actually even starting to look at headsets right now. But the answer to your question is yes. We will have to review it, and it does get it changes the pricing for each and every asset class. But we are asking our customers to try to do a phone lease or rental with us first, so we can get to know each other a little bit better, and then we're more than happy to continue to expand into the different manufacturer types that they need us to.
Awesome. And we have another question from Anthony. He is asking, do we still use our existing distributor?
Another good question, and I'm glad we're tackling the big topics here. Yes, you do currently use your same distributor. If we're not somebody that we're currently signed up with, which are most of the major distributors, whether it's Jenny, 888, Teledynamics, ScanSource, NetX USA, we're aligned with all of those major distributors at this point. if we're not using them currently, if we would just ask that you give us 2 weeks to get the distributor set up, and they're usually very eager to also start these types of programs as well.
Great. And also from Anthony, he has another question. How are RMAs for defective equipment handled?
That is a great question, because it's something I like to say the devil's in the details. The RMAs, obviously, when you're offering a rental program, are incredibly important. The way they're handled is for the first, whatever the RMA policy is of your distributor, those, if it falls within that window, within your distributor's window, you send them back to them. If it's an RMA that's outside of that, it comes back to us and we treat it as a standard, return under the rental program. If you have a 60-day grace period with one of your distributors, on day 61, those assets would start coming back to us.
It looks like we have one final question over here, and it's from Albert. He asks, he said, not being an accounting guru, do you have any collateral that educates the client on leveraging OPEX to reduce their tax liability?
I wish I have my own. I have some general notes on it, bullets that could be used effectively. The accounting rules, given anything else in terms of government regulations from a financing perspective, are still in flux and being finalized. So I do not have any tax accounting or anybody from a accounting lens that can provide that to date, but I can assure you that that's something not only are we eager to get for our customers, but also ourselves want to have that same opinion as well. But I can certainly provide the high-level bullets that are benefits as of today.
Yeah, I just want to add something to that, Pem. A lot of our, 100% of our resellers out there are white label resellers. So they're looking for information that they can go present to their customers underneath their own brand, kind of rebranded, so to speak, that can speak to this DAS program, that can speak to the benefits of it, so they can communicate that and make that a part of their presentations going forward, because they're going in and making presentations about hosted PBX and SIP trunking and video surveillance and call center, all the UCaaS functionality that we have. But what a beautiful thing is by the way, Mr. Customer, we have all these services and we also have this DAS program here. Here's how it works and here's the benefits for you, Mr. End User. So I think that's what they're looking for. So if you don't have it today, Pem, maybe you can formulate something that's going to be generic that they can integrate into their presentations.
Yeah, certainly, and we have some high-level stuff that I can certainly share with any service providers that's a little bit higher level than even this is today. And I can certainly customize some of those slides if you want certain accounting-specific things tackled.
That sounds great, and it looks like that's all the questions that we have for today.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll say that off the forefront. And again, as we alluded to earlier, I think Jason said is, the best thing to do, this is an incredibly unique and customized program to each individual service provider. So I really do encourage you to email either Sam Mahonen or myself, and we take 10 or 15 minutes and run you through the program at a high level again. And we can also answer the specific questions that are really tailored to your business. So I can't stress that enough, that it's very tailored and customized. So this hopefully just got everybody at least intrigued talking about the concepts, but we fully anticipate and hope that you guys would reach out to us for a 10 or 15-minute conversation.
Thank you, Pem. This was fantastic. So thanks for this great presentation, and thank you everyone else who took the time to join in today. We hope to see you next time on the next SkySwitch webinar series. Have a great day, everyone.